Sumaira here, and I'm here with my friend Michael,
Hey
and
everyone.
and welcome back to another episode of the Speak Real podcast. So today, Michael and I will be talking about a topic that's very important to us, and it is high functioning depression and how it's affected our lives, our experiences, and especially now during COVID, how it has been affecting us. So we're just going to get into it right now with maybe a bit of an icebreaker.
Yeah, okay. Uh, hi everyone. Like I said, my name is Michael. I'm really excited to be talking about our topic today, which is high functioning depression. But before we get into that, Samara, let me ask you, what is your favorite season and why?
That's a good question. I think I would have to say summer. And it's because I grew up in a very hot country where we didn't have winter. So all year round it was summer. So back in Bangladesh. So I don't know. I guess I get cold easily. So I just love summer.
Hmm.
But what about you?
That's true. That's true. I forgot about that, but that makes sense. Yeah. Um, for me, it's also summer. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved everything about summer. I've loved going to the beach and doing outdoor activities and going on hikes and exploring nature. And similar to you, even though I grew up here, I don't like the cold. Um, I I like I enjoy winter and all that until probably like Christmas, New Year's, and then that's it. Which is a bit unfortunate because it lasts for like 3 or 4 months longer than that. But yeah, short answer,
Yeah.
summer for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. There's just so much more to do. And even bringing up COVID again, like initially when it started, it was so cold outside. And so it's hard to find anything to do. But I think when summer came around, just being outside, taking like a short walk, it was just such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, literally.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So why don't we start and let's start off with talking about high functioning depression and what it is. So I can go ahead and start with this. So, first of all, let's just talk about depression first. So, now for all of you listening, this can be a bit confusing sometimes because it presents differently in everyone. So, I think the best way to go about this is I'll talk about what depression is like for me, and then Samira can talk about what it's like for her. So, for me, depression has felt like um, a flat feeling. It's felt like a loss of motivation. I feel like I don't have the drive to do many things. And I just want to isolate myself. For me, I like to talk about depression in terms of a roller coaster. So, for example, I give the description like imagine you're on a roller coaster and you're afraid of the drop and you're strapped into this ride. You can't get out, you can't stop it, and you're in a building and it's pitch black. You don't know when the drop was when the drop is coming, but all of a sudden you drop and you're on the ride until it's done. That's what depression has been like in my life. Sometimes I'll feel okay, and other times I just feel like my emotions and my mood just drop suddenly. I feel really bad, feel really sad, and it's almost like I have no control over it. And it's definitely affected um, pretty much every area of my life. And now bringing in the high functioning piece. So I was diagnosed with high functioning depression, which means I have depression, but the high functioning part in front of it means that on the outside, if you're looking at me, I'm doing all the things that you would expect someone to be doing without dealing with mental health challenges such as depression. So, for example, I would do my homework, I would exercise, eat right, my sleep was okay. And what this meant for people um, looking at me is that I would say, if I were to tell someone what I was going through, that I had depression, it was like the biggest surprise. I would often get, oh, you like you seem so happy. Like I would never have known. So that's what high functioning depression kind of means. So I guess let me turn it over to you, Samira. Is that similar for you, different? And if so, how? And what's that been like for you?
I think for me, it was definitely a lot of what you said resonated, and I could hear myself even saying that, yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And then there are other parts where it felt a bit more, I guess some of the symptoms of depression were different for me. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if I think of my experiences, I can think of two words, which was brain fog. So that was something that was so prevalent in my life where I always describe it as one day you wake up and you walk outside and you see just the entire place covered in a thicket of fog and you just can't see things properly. So everything in my life became kind of this dreary gray, and it just felt like the color was gone. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of what you had said, it felt very monotone. Every day just felt very, I was very bored. But like in the simplest word, I think I had never felt this feeling of just thinking that every day was just the same and I was just waking up for nothing, and it just felt like this hopelessness.
Yeah.
And that to me tied in with also high functioning depression where I was going to work. I was actually doing a great, I was working really well at my new job. I was
Mm-hmm.
able to I remember that every day I would go to work and people would tell me, oh, you're smiling all the time. And it's like you're so happy and it's like inside what I felt was so different than what I showed on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it to a point it actually for me it it started getting more and more difficult where I couldn't show that I was smiling all the time. It started getting worse at work where I would go into work and my eyes would be all puffy from like no sleep. And then remember like some of my colleagues started to notice and they're like, are you okay? Did you get enough sleep? So it really was a lot of high functioning depression and then that turning into something more severe.
Right. Yeah. And you actually brought up a lot of good points there, and a couple of them I can really relate to as well. The first being that, yeah, it just kind of felt like you, woke up every day, kind of just went through the motions, weren't really like living, nothing was really fulfilling, just kind of like, doing your routine, right? And so, yeah, I definitely understand that. And the other part is eventually, right, you get tired of trying to do all this stuff and appear like you're okay because on the inside it's very different. So for me, I would always get tired, but not physically, like mentally tired, right? Because you spend so much mental energy trying to fight this and figure it out and smile on the outside, even though on the inside it's the opposite, right? So yeah, that's that's kind of what it felt like for me at times too. So
Mhm.
I get
And
I get that.
yeah, and I also think that when you're going through it, like even if it is high functioning depression, like don't let the words fool you in the sense that it's such
Mhm.
a struggle doing everything as well. Like you mentioned that you were going to school, you were doing everything, you were taking your tests. Like it was still like, at least for myself, like it was still a struggle to get myself out of bed, go to work every morning or go to school and do work. So
Of
there
course,
were.
of course, of course. And that reminds me of as you were talking about that, a quote that I think I saw on Instagram, and it goes something like, just because you can't see the weight of someone's baggage and they hide it well, it doesn't mean it's not heavy,
I
right?
love that. That's
Yeah, because it's true, right? Just because people seem okay and you don't see it, it doesn't mean that they are, right? I'm sure. I know. I'm sure you understand that, right? Um,
definitely.
so yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to describe high functioning depression.
And also, I remember there talking about quotes. There was a quote that really, it was funny, but at the same time so true, which is there was a meme I saw where it's two doors, and one door says depression for a good reason, and another door says depression for no reason. So
Oh,
not a good reason.
uh-huh.
So so it's just, it shows that, you don't need something that other people think are like good reasons, like maybe the loss of a loved one to experience depression. It can be so many things that are triggering it and impacting it that you don't
Right.
even realize.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, that was the other thing for me. Because nothing ever happened in my life that was this big traumatic event that I could clearly say, you know what, I became depressed because of that. So that honestly used to drive me insane because I'm just inherently a problem solver and I was trying to solve this, I'm doing quotation marks, quote unquote, problem. And I couldn't find a solution to it because it's just not that simple, right?
Mhm.
And I think it took me a long time to accept that. But once I did, it actually became easier to kind of move on from it and try and cope and get better, right? Instead of trying to fight against it.
Definitely. And I was going to ask that, how did it affect you and your relationships while you were experiencing this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So like I mentioned, it affected pretty much every area of my life and my relationships being a big part of it. So just in terms of relationships and social interaction, I would find myself withdrawing a lot, especially when it came to going out with friends. And often you hear that someone who is depressed, it's good to get out and talk to people. But to be honest, for me, that wasn't necessarily the case because, for example, I would be out with friends at a birthday party and I would be looking at everyone having such a great time, and I would be pretending to have a great time, but on the inside, I would be just dying and hurting because I knew I couldn't. And it was a big weight to bear. So for me, sometimes I actually didn't feel better going out and interacting with people because then I would compare myself. I would look at
Mhm.
people who were happy or who seemed happy, having a great time, laughing, and I would try, you know, but I wasn't. Deep down, I knew I wasn't, and that made me really feel bad about myself for sure because I wanted to do that too, but at the time I just couldn't.
I'm glad that you did mention that, because it's such a difficult experience where before you may have enjoyed these experiences and going to parties, seeing people and friends and socializing, but that moment, like, it's such a real moment where you do go to the place and you're like, "I used to have fun at these places, so it should be fun," but that comparison that I could be happier, I would actually compare to my past self. That was something that I really needed to stop, was comparing that, "Oh, but a year ago, I used to feel great. I used to love socializing and laughing, and my friends would give me so much energy."
Mhm.
But it was that shift where, in the middle of the night, I remember like I would have that experience as well, that when I'm in a crowd, I had this idea of what the night would go like, but at the end of the night, I would be left feeling so alone inside.
Right.
And it was definitely just tough because it wasn't enjoyable when I was going through it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I think a lot of people do that maybe without realizing it, is comparing to, an experience in the past. So I'm curious, when you were doing this, was there judgment involved in that too? Like, were you putting yourself down because you weren't able to feel the way you have in the past or do the same things or?
Yeah, that's such a good question because through therapy and just through recovery, that was something I was doing a lot of. I realized that judging myself, not accepting my feelings, um, comparing myself, like all these red flags that, they tell you
Yeah,
not to be doing,
right.
but you don't realize the subconscious things that you tell yourself in your
Yeah,
mind. It's
yeah,
so discreet.
yeah,
But for
yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say they end up being like these core limiting beliefs that you think for so long that you don't even realize it, and it's difficult to notice it, but once you do, it can be super helpful, right? Yeah. So,
Hmm,
well, go ahead.
what were some realizations that you came across after recovery or on your journey?
Hmm, that's a great question. Um, well, one of the first things I realized is that I don't have to pretend to be okay all the time, because that is a heavy weight to carry. It's a pretty heavy burden on your shoulders. I know it was for me, and I do have that small group of people that I've really opened up to since then. They know what I've been going through and what I struggle with, and I feel comfortable being vulnerable with those people. And it really does help because I don't have to pretend. I don't have to spend so much energy trying to feel something when inside maybe I really don't, right? So that was one important one. Another one was that I don't need to try and solve this problem, because at the end of the day, it's not a problem, right? It's just, it is what it is, right? And I've accepted that this is something that I deal with, but I also know it's not going to last forever. So it's not helpful to fight against it, right? Let's look at it, but I also have to put in work and be patient in order to understand it, because man, it took a long time to understand it for myself, right? Um, but once you do put in that time, oh my gosh, you learn so much more about yourself. And I actually found a lot of strengths through my challenges and my journey through high functioning depression. Like, for example, emotional intelligence and my ability to connect with people. So I don't know if it was like this for you, but for me, because I was on this, like I said, roller coaster of emotions, in order for me to move forward, I really had to spend time learning and understanding my emotions. And once I was able to do that, oh my gosh, now I find it so easy to understand other people's emotions, right? So, like a lot of good things came out of it, but man, did I have to be patient and work towards it, right? So, I know
Mm,
that was kind of a long answer, but yeah,
no,
those are a few
no,
of the things that I kind of learned along the way.
no, that was really insightful and really great to hear, like, all those pieces of, uh, things that helped you along the journey,
Hmm.
and there were a lot of it, like patience, oh my gosh, like, that is definitely one of them. Patience is so important, and it's important to realize that even on the journey to recovery, you can have days where you don't feel well and your body remembers those feelings of being low. I think I want to bring it to like the current times where at the beginning of this pandemic, I just remember like that low feeling of not wanting to leave the bed came back,
Mm,
where some days I just didn't want to leave.
right.
And you have to tell yourself and remind yourself that you are on this path and you're recovering, and each day it's getting better and better. But you will have those days where it may not be the best, and that's okay. Not to go back all the way and have that all or nothing thinking that, you know, nothing works or like, I'm it's not working or
Yeah.
nothing is ever gonna happen.
Hmm.
But just remind yourself that it's okay, and that to kind of also neutralize your thoughts, because it's so easy
Hmm.
to become so extreme on the negative side, um,
Right.
at times.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Now that we're talking about COVID, for me, like we were saying, some of that judgment started to creep in because there was a time when I was really struggling and I was judging myself for it, saying things like, "Oh, like I've come so far. How did I come back to feeling like this? Like I've done so much work, like I mentioned, and yet I still feel like this. Like, oh man." And I used to judge myself a lot, saying, "Oh, I should be feeling better. Like I should feel like going out and exercising. I should." And this took a lot of personal development and working with a therapist, a mental health professional. And I realized, which was really insightful actually, that every time we say to ourselves, "I should," that's a judgment right there,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And tell that to people, and it kind of blows their mind a little bit because they've never really thought of it like that. But
mhm,
every single time you say "I should" or "I should not," you are judging yourself, because if you're saying "I should," it means that you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, or you haven't done something that you're supposed to do. Now,
mhm,
whether that's true or not, I don't know, right? I think it depends, but nevertheless, you should be saying things like, "I want," right? "I want to do this. I feel like doing this," not, "Oh,
mhm,
but I should be doing this," right? So even just the language that I was saying to myself, the way I was speaking to myself, I really had to take a look at, especially during COVID, because it was a tough time for me. And, I'm sure for a lot of people who were dealing with mental health challenges in the past, or maybe even just found new ones because of COVID, because of the isolation, right? Is that something
mhm.
that you can relate to?
Yeah, definitely. When you said I should, that's something that I also recognize in my own dialogue a
Hmm.
lot of times. And I realize that with that statement, we're also putting so much expectations on ourselves.
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah, and when we fail those expectations, we do not go easy on ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
It's so tough. So it was a lot of that through COVID. One thing I realized through this, just from the beginning, is the moment that I started talking to myself badly or in a negative way
Hmm.
was the moment that like treated the people around me, my relationships, in just negative ways. I realized how much my self talk impacted the people around and how I interacted with my family. It was so I just needed to reflect, and I think through COVID, it was a lot of isolation and time by yourself, and in some ways, I can see that it could help. That self-reflection is something that can help so much on the journey, and just things like journaling and realizing what are you saying to yourself and is it helping you?
Right, right. Yeah, that's you said a lot of really great stuff there. So I want to take a step back just for a second, and I want to point something out for our listeners in case they missed it, because you talked a little bit about expectations, and I think the whole thing about expectations and I should, that goes really well with high functioning depression, because to all of you listening, we mentioned towards the beginning of our talk that people with high functioning depression tend to spend a lot of energy trying to look okay on the outside. So here's where the shoulds come in. Okay, well, now I should be doing this, and I should get my work done, and I should go exercise, because I gotta pretend like I'm okay, even if on the inside I don't feel it, right? So I think that's pretty prevalent when there's challenges around high functioning depression. And
Mhm.
you said something else about affecting your family, and you really had to slow down and reflect. And I think that's super important too. And you talked a little bit about coping tools, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, one of the big things for me is really slowing down and being honest with myself, because again, I was spending time trying to look okay on the outside. I really had to slow down and be like, okay, how am I really feeling right now? And even though I didn't really like the answer sometimes, and I didn't want to sit in that feeling, because who wants to do that, right? Instead, it's like, oh, like, I don't want to feel like this. Like, let me just push it way down. Let's move on, right? I'm okay. Let me go do what I quote unquote should be doing now. But even though it didn't feel great to kind of look into what I was feeling, I found it pretty incredible that once you do, even something as simple as, wow, you know what? I'm feeling hurt right now. It makes the feeling go away surprisingly pretty quick. Or maybe not go away, but it doesn't have that much of an effect on you.
Mhm.
That's that's what I found.
Yeah, that's amazing. That reflection as well is so true. You don't think that. It's not a reflexive thought that, if you actually accept that emotion, that it'll be quicker for you to kind of move
Right.
through it.
Yeah.
But it is, instead of pushing it down, pushing until one day it pops out and like double what it was,
Yeah.
kind of allowing yourself to move through whatever you're feeling just lets you just get through it faster and in a more meaningful way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And so,
Mhm.
with that being said, I think it would be useful for us to kind of talk about what are some of the things that we do to feel better, help us along this journey, help us along with our challenges. So, could be something specific to high functioning depression, or I guess just depression in general. I'm sure that would be useful. So, Samira, why don't you start?
Yeah, so for me, coping tools that have really helped, one, I was journaling. So journaling is something that I've always liked writing, but just writing my thoughts out when I'm feeling upset
Mm-hmm.
helps it just get it down on paper and out of my mind. Another tool I use is reading.
Mm-hmm.
I've realized that when I am having just a really bad day and I'm just not feeling okay, reading is something that just like takes that pressure off. And same with painting. So finding hobbies that really work for me is something that that has helped through COVID from the beginning to the end. I think I've switched up my hobbies like 10 times already
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
one thing doesn't work for me all the time. But I think finding that as well has also helped me get to know myself at a deeper level
Hmm.
where I can be more self-reflective and understand myself. And
Interesting.
yeah, and another two coping tools that are really, really helpful, I think, is one is just eating healthy. So I just notice my mood when I'm not eating healthy and I'm just kind of and that goes along with my other tool, which is cooking. So,
Ah, okay, there you go.
so I love cooking and mostly maybe not the healthiest, but interesting recipes. And it also helps me feel like, I'm not taking out food. I'm, treating my body properly and
Mhm.
with care. So those are some really helpful tools that kind of has eased the whole situation for me.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that makes a lot of sense because I definitely feel that too, that there's a pretty close overlap between physical health and mental health, right? So for me, definitely when I eat better, I feel better, right? Which goes along with exercise. So for me, exercise is a big part of it. And to be honest, lately it's just meant going out for a walk at the end of the day with my dog to kind of unwind, especially because I find myself, and I think a lot of us can relate to this because we're working from home, just sitting down for most of the day and slouching
Mhm.
over at my laptop doing work, and I'm not getting out as much. So it's almost like I feel this need to do something, right? So just going out for a walk, I find is really helpful for me. Like I said, talking to someone about whatever I'm feeling, right, is always great. Could be a trusted family member, could be a mental health professional, which I definitely recommend. And writing down my thoughts is a big one for me too, because like I said, once you sit with the feeling or the thought and you can name it and you can see it, then you can start to understand it and deal with it and
Mhm.
move forward, right? So that's super important too. Create any type of creative expression is always helpful. Like you mentioned, I know you do a lot of that stuff, and just really, I guess the bottom line with any coping tool, for me or for you and for anyone listening, a good coping tool will be something that energizes you, that brings your energy up. So, like I know you and I, Sumaira, gave a lot of examples, but really that's pretty much what it is, right? It's something that you use when you're feeling low, that'll help you feel better and that can move you along, right? Just kind of help you in the moment. It's not going to solve all the problems in the world, right? But it'll help you for that day, for that minute, whatever you need. Yeah.
Yeah, those were some really amazing ones, and I feel like you've listed out so many that people can take away. And as you mentioned, like it's something that is so unique to the person. So you just have to kind of figure out what works best for you. And for
Exactly.
COVID specifically, I want to say one more coping
Yeah,
tool,
sure.
which really I think right now it's just taken us like COVID has taken us out of our usual routines.
Right.
And I found that things that may have brought you that energy that you knew brought you that energy, they might have changed and it's not possible anymore.
Yep.
So it's definitely one is discovering what that is for you now, challenging yourself to discover that. And the second thing is routines. So if
Mm,
you are a
yes.
person that is just not sure what to do with this time, make a routine. It could be literally filled with three things,
Yep.
wake up in the morning, have breakfast, and, do something,
Yep.
but just start and try it out because I can at least for myself, it has helped so much just writing out what I want to do, setting my goals for the day, and then, also allowing myself to slack on some of them,
Yes, yes.
going through with that.
That's super important. And the thing is, everyone listening with these routines, you have to do it whether you want to or not, because there will be days um, that you will not want to do anything and stay in bed. But by doing that, it's definitely not going to help, right? So whether you want to or not, whether that means enlisting your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your grandparent to drag your butt out of bed, right? You have to make sure that you follow through on routine. So
Definitely.
that's a really great tip. I love that. So I
I
think
love that as
I,
well.
I think we're almost done here. But to sum it up, I want to say something I saw on an Instagram post about high functioning depression that I think is a pretty good summary of what we talked about, and maybe something for you all listening to think about going forward. So this account did a post, and it's in a chart format. The first column is what people see. The second column is what might be actually happening, specifically for high functioning depression. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this out. So what people see, jokes and smiles. What might be happening, difficulty accepting and expressing painful emotions. What people see, caring for others. What might be happening, feeling undeserving of the same love themselves. What people see, high achieving and go-getters. What might be happening, imposter syndrome, feeling undeserving. What people see, constantly busy. What might be happening, struggling to be alone with thoughts. What people see, unshakable in tough times. What might be happening, which we mentioned, numb and apathetic to the outcome. What people see, working long hours. What might be happening, distraction from their own pain.
Mm. Wow, those are amazing. And I got some goosebumps just listening to it because they're just so relatable and it
Mhm.
really does sum up everything that we've talked about today. And I think it's just a great way right now to close this off and
Yeah,
end today's episode. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Speak Real podcast. And thank you, Michael, for joining today and discussing high functioning depression with me.
of course, anytime. It was a great conversation. I think people are going to get a lot of value from it.
And I just want to give another special shout out to the TD Bank Group for helping support our online programming and all of you for tuning in right now. And if you would like to help support our Youth by Youth initiatives, you can go to youthspeak.ca where you can donate. So we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.